Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Triangle Button Podcast. Today is a pretty special episode because not only do we have our good buddy Caleb as our guest, but we have a new guest, Paul. So we're just gonna go around. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience here?
Yeah, I'm Paul. I study computer engineering. I play a lot of music on my own. I've played piano my whole life, and yeah, I enjoy that. Um, yeah, that's about it. And
Nice, nice.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no worries. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess first off in our discussion for today's podcast, I know that we've been talking a lot about on our previous podcast about TV shows and film and all of those different things, and something that we all have a really huge interest in was Vince Gilligan's direction of Breaking Bad, and as Caleb knows, and as well as Paul, the storytelling was very unique for its time when Breaking Bad first came out, because they really introduced this idea of the show don't tell rule. And I know Hale has some interesting thoughts on especially what makes Breaking Bad so unique in the TV show genre is this fact that of symbolism. And we can talk about the different narratives of what it masculinity as in all these different fields. But Caleb, I think it'd be great you go off on what you want to talk about in terms of the show's a perfect example of.
Sure. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say that it introduced the show don't tell rule, but it definitely demonstrated a mastery of it. I feel that Breaking Bad is such a strong show even 10 years after its original release or its original climax because throughout the entire show they don't really talk about the themes, they just sort of lay them out in terms of what the thrust of the story is. At no point in the story does Walter White say, actually, with one exception, in that entire series, Walter White almost never directly expresses his real motivations. We only see his motivations shift with his actions actually, it's not even until the final episode when he actually sort of admits why he really does what he does. And I find that really interesting because it's something that in the era of verbose speeches on TV and sort of, clipped dialogue about characters sort of looking at the camera and shouting what they believe, it's a nice change of pace. And I also just think that when you go the more subtle route, it leaves people more room to connect with it on a deeper level and maybe insert some of their own experiences onto a show, which I think is really interesting. And in addition to subtext, it also is a good example of what I'd say is, like you mentioned, symbolism. Now, symbolism is usually pretty bad in most things that I see them in. I don't like symbolism in most media. I find it to be pretentious and heavy handed. But in the case of Breaking Bad, there is one example of the pool that, if you notice, in every season, there's that pool in his backyard and different objects fall in. And they sort of represent what's been sort of sacrificed to his sort of bottomless need for power. In the first season, they sort of show money throwing in the pool. In the second season, it's worth seeing that the teddy bear falls in the pool. In the fifth season, it's Skylar who goes in. And I think things like that are worth tracking as a viewer to figure out what the show means. But I've said enough. I think that's my introduction to how I feel about the show.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, I do want to state. I know they didn't introduce the show don't tell rule. That has been a constant thematic device that has been shown for a lot of different filmmaking practices. I just I think that just like you said that Breaking Bad is a wonderful example of how to expertly execute this. Something that I just realized. Yeah, I never noticed that Skylar going into the pool. It does really very much symbolize how he's lost her. The money is a loss in his execution to power, or not execution. Sorry, on his trip to power. And I think that's a great thematic device that is used. Paul, do you have any thoughts on this on Breaking Bad and their use of this thematic device?
well, yeah, you notice in the scenes where they fast forward to far in the future, when the house is abandoned, the pool's empty. Some people skateboard off of that. It's almost like representing the decay of what Walter was. He went from a middle
Mm,
class teacher. Well, he was struggling middle class, but he owned a home, relatively good position, loving family. Once he started laundering the money with the drugs, and when it was still kind of safe, the pool was still there. It was something they would have dinner with Hank, right beside. Place they'd frequent a lot. And then yeah, at the end, it's just abandoned. It's filled in, vandalized, and yeah, it's a powerful symbol.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's definitely like a powerful like symbol. I do agree with the fact that like I mean it's just like how you like put to like how like it's just like left, it's like empty, it's graffitied, like there's nothing left. It just represents like that hollowness that everything he's done to get to this level of power, it's just for nothing. And that like actually leads me to like a good question. Do you guys think that Walter was in the right for the actions that he's done, like throughout the entire thing, and just for the audience watching, like just so you guys know for, like what we're discussing in terms of the show, like Walter, like his involvement in the meth business has, he's risked everything. Multiple people have died. He's betrayed a lot of individuals, poisoned a kid in one instance. Taking all the summations of his actions, do you think that like it was like well reasoned for him to do these things in the end, like everything that he's done.
Hmm. Well, I mean, okay, when he entered it, he really didn't foresee it going far. Originally it was he was unhappy with his life. He gets the cancer diagnosis. He needs money, and so when he first meets with Jesse, he won't even tell him the reason. In fact, he doesn't really go deep into the reasons at any point. But Jesse kind of finds out, okay, yeah, he has cancer. He's trying to make money, but immediately they realize like this involves crime. And so when they had to kill Crazy Eight, that was kind of a big defining moment where it's like, okay, this is real. Um, and then over time, though, like, he had many points where he could have backed out. He could have sold off and taken the money and just live a happy rest of his life. And he didn't. And he would refer to that story, about how he sold off the shares in that company,
Hmm.
that couple. And he was kind of trying to convey the message, okay, like, don't sell out. There's something bigger coming. And, like, I think sometimes in life that's true. Like, and a lot of stories will kind of send that message of, like, no, like, stick to it, like, stick to the end. But I think this is, like, almost a case where he should have. He had a chance. And it would have made a less interesting story. But if he did at some point, who knows? Maybe Hank wouldn't have been killed. Maybe they could have enjoyed their winnings. Maybe the family wouldn't be destroyed. But you know, he wanted more and more and more.
Hmm.
I'm going to break this down in a very intellectual way, if you guys don't mind,
Sure.
because it's worth doing this when asking moral questions. I truly believe that when asking the question of is anything right or is anything wrong, we need to sort of look at the past, present, and future of the action. Usually, we look at the intentions, which sort of goes into the virtue of what was done. The next thing we look at is the action itself. Is this an acceptable action or is it not an acceptable action? And then the last part is the consequences. What does this mean down the road? I bring up sort of famous trolley problem as a question of is it okay to do something a little bit bad in the present if it has better consequences in the future?
Hmm.
That given, let's sort of look at Walter on those three levels. The most interesting one is the first one, and it's his intentions. Walter's intentions they're devious, to be sure. He's motivated almost entirely by greed and pride the more that story goes on. He starts off with a flake of compassion and love for his family and guilt for murdering I believe it was the two of them, actually, the two
Hmm.
gangsters. But as the show goes on, they sort of explore the idea that this man just wants a big pile of money so he can bury it in the desert. Like, they sort of show that explicitly. He doesn't even want to spend the money. He just wants to have it. So on that, we could sort of condemn him as saying, and the easy answer is that he's motivated purely by greed. But to put more sympathy to the guy, like, he never really got to live his life. Like, it seems like his whole existence had just been other people shoving him down and him standing by while opportunities sort of drifted along, and then eventually getting sort of eddying into a dead end marriage and eddying into a dead end career and ending up with two kids, one of them by accident, and just sort of showing that he was never really the main character of his own story. So in that sense, I think there's an inkling of sympathy in his motivations that he wanted to live his life. He wanted to see his through on his full potential, and I think that's what I think that's what everyone wants on some level. So on the first level of intentions, I can't speak to his the things he did or the consequences they had on the world, but in his intentions, I think there's a grain of sympathy there.
Well, also don't forget he's like dealing with chemotherapy. It's very expensive. Like, his family wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise, and like it gives you some sympathy towards like Americans who have to deal with that healthcare system. You know,
Yeah, yeah, that's
like
true.
thank God that's not as much of a concern here, but like, yeah, it is a real concern to those who have to pay like ridiculous medical bills for some, because the insurance companies made it that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course. Like something Caleb, that you like brought up that like I thought was interesting was how you said that Walter White, his entire life he has gone without like not living it. He's always been living in fear, and I know that in the one instance he says, for like the first time when I heard that diagnosis was the time I felt like awake.
yes.
Now I know you said that he never got to like live his life, but do you find that like because although like he says that was the first time he was truly like awake, did he really live his life? Because the rest of his life, like I know like he says like that was the first time he was awake, but it seems like he was still living in fear consistently afterwards, and he doesn't ever like kind of address like how ever since his cancer diagnosis he went into the drug business. He was living in fear the entire time, always living in fear about people like taking his money, living in fear of potentially like leaving his family alone with nothing to have, right? Oh, sorry, my cat.
True, true.
Anyways, like, always worrying about every minuscule thing. So he never truly lived. I think the only time he lived was when he had the excess of money where he bought Walter Jr. his car, like a car, and then he had his own fancy car. But, I never would like really like say that he lived. Like, I'm just like curious of like, your thought like of what it means like to have lived in his case
Well,
because he claimed like because he was always living in fear.
I think that's what made him alive. Because think about it at the beginning. In the first episode, when the doctor tells him that he's going to lose the life he has, Walter White's first response is, "You have mustard here on your shirt." And that to me is the sign of someone who is not truly alive. If someone tells you that you're about to have your life ripped away from you and the only thing in your mind is that there's mustard on your shirt and he's just sort of, oh great, another thing that hasn't gone my way, I think the fear was a sign that he actually had something that he cared about. He took pride in his drug empire, and when people inflicted that with anything, he actually got mad, and he wasn't sort of a pushover, but he was scared of it. He experienced sadness. Like we only really see him go into what felt like real emotions after he became Eisenberg. So I'd say actually yes, that doesn't. I wouldn't say that refutes the idea that he was living. I'd say it actually bolsters it.
Okay, so like you're almost like stating that like because he had like because the fear was coming from a sense of that his own agency to do those very things. That's what made him alive versus like his entire life where he had no agency in anything that he did. He constantly lived in the fear and like doing everything safely. So when he did go out, risking his life, doing all of these very things, living and worrying all the time, that is the moment that he was alive. That's what you're saying
Exactly.
because his agency was there.
Yet you summarized what I think perfectly.
Okay, like yeah, okay, that's like I like that. I like that like understanding of it. Do you have anything like to add, like Paul?
Well, yeah, the big thing that I guess underlines the whole story is he's gonna die of his cancer eventually, and so if most well, it's hard to say maybe if most people, but I think most people if they hear that like that that's gonna weigh on them heavily in a negative way, like it's just you're gonna always be thinking about that, and it's a bit of a depressing thing. But instead, he uses that to like embolden himself to like engage in this, and he enjoys it. Really, at not many points in the movie is he like complaining about how he's gonna die. It's more like he knows it's gonna happen. Like it's stage 3 cancer, nothing can change this. But he's instead like using that time, that little bit of time, 2 years or so, to do what he wants, and for himself. No one else tells him otherwise.
Well, what's funny about that is that like there is actually like a moment in like the mid seasons where Walter's actually saying like, "Hey, the cancer's like has a recession. This is great. You're gonna be cured. And he gets pissed off and like punches like the ventilation system like in the bathroom. And like as I know, like me and Caleb had a conversation about this, like the reason why he got angry. And like Caleb, if you want to like pick it up from here, like you give.
He got angry because it sort of sent him back to his old life. And he realized that his old life was boring. He had no interest in it. And that I think sort of showed the beginning of it was a bit of a slip, but it was the moment that he realized that really he was happier as Eisenberg. And if you think about it, the strange thing about that is that getting cancer was a death sentence for Walter, but having it recede or what's the word? Go into remiss. That's the word.
Oh, remission. Yeah.
Remission. That was a death sentence for Eisenberg. And in that moment, we saw which one of them was willing to fight for their life harder, which I thought was a really beautiful scene. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but
no, I mean there is something to that. Yeah. I always wondered though, like in the end, when he goes far in the future, he stops taking his chemo. Like you see his hair grow back and his cancer progress. Like, do you guys remember what was the reason? Like, did he ever explain why he like gave up on his chemo at that point?
Sorry, you go. Oh, no, that's okay. You go.
No, I insist.
I was going to say like I believe like the reasoning was because he's like kind of like realized it is a loneliness like in like the North Country that what's the point in living in hiding and just like barely living. He's taking his chemotherapy originally, but he has no one to talk to. He gets so depressed and so lonely that he actually pays a guy to just stay the few hour or two just to talk with him. So I think it's the fact that it really like opens his eyes that, you need to like, although like he has his wealth, he's done everything that he's technically wanted to. It's the fact that he has no one to like actually talk to or like present that image of like what he's actually fighting for. It just makes him give up in all senses. See, this is what I find interesting in the show is that, because we all know that like originally he's like, oh, I'm doing this for my family. I'm breaking the law for the, to raise this money to make sure that when I pass, they take over. And then at the end state of the show, we know that he says that, no, like I did it because I liked it. This is where I got kind of confused in the last season was because to me, it's demonstrated that, like he was just like lonely and that he had nothing to fight for. But yeah, he admits that he didn't need anything to fight for because the thrill of doing like creating meth was enough for him. So do you guys think that there's a little bit like of like, little like weirdness like in the writing? Like, did you ever like notice that?
I didn't feel that way, but I'd be curious Paul to hear your thoughts.
I'm just trying to like that he didn't like he began to enjoy cooking. Well, it was always kind of I don't think he totally got it himself why he cooked meth. That's the thing to like a certain point. Like I think if someone really like questioned him hard, like why, he might like, well yeah, he may say on the surface money, power, but like something a bit deeper. I think it was just about like, well, that's the thing. He did say in the last season, I cooked it because I enjoyed it, and like that was a powerful moment. Like it's kind of the one line we're waiting for, but it's also a bit deeper of like, this is him rejecting his boring past. The past of washing cars at the car wash with that terrible boss, the mediocre teacher job, and just like, yeah, going something better, something most people could never aspire to in terms of power and money.
He actually got to live up to his potential, like, and be a chemist.
Mm-hmm.
He got to do what he loved, and he got to be like respected for it. And
yeah,
on some level, even if it was by a bunch of junkies and gangsters, it became like, okay, well, this is a guy who on his own birthday party wasn't the star of attention and was like the butt of the jokes that the cops were making. Like in the civilian world, he did not have a status worth admiring, but in the drug world, he did. And I think that was just enough for him.
Yeah, because like I always like interpreted like in the final season, like although like he like admitted like that he was living like this like facade of like he's not being the provider of the family. That's not what it really is. It's about the fact that he dominates the drug world. It's that he has his power. I just always find it confusing because like it was almost like because he stopped his like cancer treatment, and where like it almost like like seemed to me that he like was actually like full of regret that he did the things that he did, and where it was almost kind of mixed in the end, where he was both like like prideful of what he's done, but also regretted because it destroyed his entire family and everything that like he loved and originally started to do for his family. I was just like curious, like of like your thoughts like on that.
Well, it was a weird moment in well, it was understandable his own family didn't want to take the money. It's blood money. It's crime money. And like that's the thing he worked so hard for. And I mean, he was probably very shocked when he heard the whole they don't want to do that. And if you remember that scene where he's trying to flee the house with Skylar, and there's a moment where she and Skylar or Skylar and Flynn turn on him, and it's kind of yeah he was shocked because it's all of what he worked for his family's rejecting, and it's because he destroyed things. So I think in the end he kind of regrets that it destroyed his family, but yeah, still proud of what he did. Proud enough that he wants the money to end up to them, even if they don't, even if he gets no credit for it. He he gives it to that couple. And yeah, because when you think about it, like if his family doesn't want the money, then what's the good of the money? Is he trying to win over their love and stuff like that? No, not necessarily, because like he knows they're rejecting it, but he still wants it to get to them. He still wants to give his contribution to them.
Yeah, that's true. Um, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course. Yeah,
I think
I sorry, you go.
so. I was just say part of it is also the facts that, like, I guess you got to keep in mind, um, Walter at that point in the show, I think, and I think he always sort of said this like, cancer treatment doesn't work in his. At least he says it doesn't. That's all that really matters from a character analysis perspective. Um, where like, if you have lung cancer, it is kind of a death sentence, I believe, in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you're, yeah, like it'll go at that age. Like you're 15, you get cancer. Like, um, realistically, especially lung cancer, the understanding is that like, okay, you die now or you die tomorrow. Even if you beat it back, like there's still some flake of it somewhere that'll come back to bite you. Um, so then on that level, he just sort of saw it as like yeah, like what's the point? Like what am I really fighting for? Going through all of this misery just to have another day of misery? Like, what's the end goal here?
Yeah, fair enough. Well, switching topics just like a little bit here because all of like this like topic on like on Breaking Bad and their thematic devices as well as like their good storytelling, it kind of like made me reflect a little bit on like the state of like Hollywood and modern filmmaking at this point. Do you think that films like are deteriorating in their like like how good they are in terms of like their ability to tell a story, and if so, like what makes these like films better or worse, and why is it occurring in this like modern time?
Um, I'm gonna jump in first here. I think the first problem is probably just a lack of originality. And I'm actually going to go bolder than most critics because everyone kind of says that and say that it's also on part of the viewer. Um, we need to ask more of Hollywood than for them to just give us the same story over and over again. And I think, yeah, that'd probably be in the world of sequels and remakes and, you know, sequels that are deep down actually just remakes with, like, set 20 years later in Jurassic World, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that we just need more originality.
Yeah. Well, like why do you think like this originality is like struggling? Is it like on a result of like the fact like the actual like film studios, like because when you look at like the actual viewers and what's actually like making money, we know that we've seen like an uptick at like of MCU superhero films, DC films, and there's almost like this very like minor subsection of like good movies, or if it is a good movie, it's because it's a remake of a classic film, and it begs the question of like do you think like these like if film studios will understand that they need to just make like hire these like indie directors and let them like be on their own because or is it that they're giving them like these like film directors that are new like too much money and too much like expectation instead of like minor films because a lot of the great films like throughout history have been like that. You basically said here, make some movie. You have like $5 million, hire some actors, do whatever you want. And do you think it's because there's a lack of that, or is it because like studios are almost afraid to go outside this comfort zone because of like the nice like softening like that they've made with like these superhero genres and remakes?
I think it's the latter. I mean, the more investment into a project there is, the less risk people are willing to take. Um, like I'll bet you 20 cents on anything, but hard to get me to bet $1,000 on anything either. Um, and it's that same sort of mindset where, as budgets get bigger for these movies, and they become bigger and bigger blockbusters, I think a lot of studios aren't willing to take the same risks. Another part of it that I saw some frightening numbers on this. Um, a movie is considered a failure if it just barely breaks even. Because
Mhm.
these days, a movie's job is also fund 5 other movies that failed and bombed at the box office.
Mm.
And consistently, it just seems like any kind of risk, people won't go to see. People just have narrower and narrower ideas of what kind of movies they want to see these days. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, the worst offender in all this would be, I think, Disney. Like they've remade so many of their good classics, and I've thought about like I don't know, I don't have the numbers and how popular these remakes are, but I mean like a lot of us grew up watching the cartoons when like these were special parts of our childhood, but like for them to try and remake that, like yeah, they can put live action, but like I don't want to see it in live action. And I don't think many people want to see that. But they're still pushing it. I don't know what's the thinking on that. I don't know if Disney's taking a calculation. Oh, people will love it because everyone knows Snow White or something. Um, but yeah, it is more boring. It's less original. And like yeah, there's so many good indie movies or like low budget movies that like make it big. Like for example, like I love the movie Whiplash. And like
Mm.
and it's a great story, and because they don't go all out with all the special effects and all this. It's really just the telling of a story of a kid in a band. It's you just need a few sets for the different scenes, and it's all the actors, and it's
Yeah,
I think we need more indie directors. I think yeah, I mean less money thrown at movies in general. Like I think when it comes to movies, I really just like drama. Like I like the good story. I don't care for the cool explosions as much, and like there is a genre or there is an appeal, especially for people like superhero movies and stuff like that. But like, I think a good number of people just like good stories, and like, yeah, often lower budget movies cover that, and yeah, bit bigger artistic freedom with them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I agree with that like wholeheartedly. I remember like Whiplash was like like Damien Chazelle's like debut like like film where like he put like all of his like passion like and he knew exactly what he did like the quick camera cuts and everything. I'm just curious because like I know that he just released his fourth movie now. Like, well, a lot of people don't recall his third movie like after La La Land being like First Man with Ryan Gosling, where it took uh like the
That was
Apollo 11
Damien.
mission.
That was Damien Chazelle. I didn't even know.
Yeah, it was Damien Chazelle, and they threw a lot of money at it. And then he's just like, "Yeah, I want to like cover like Ryan Gosling as oh shoot, who was was it Lance Armstrong who was like Apollo 11 on the moon?
Neil Armstrong.
Neil
Neil
Armstrong.
Armstrong. What I think Lance.
Never confused. Lance Armstrong was a beautiful position, but not. I
Yeah,
don't know.
sorry.
I'm not sure if he went to the moon. I can't confirm that.
Oh, okay, yeah. Wait. Did you say you can't confirm about the moon?
I can't confirm your theory that he went to the moon. I'm not sure.
Oh, we gotta get into conspiracy theories now, huh?
Yeah. Not
Well,
quite with you there.
what? Okay. Well, Neil Armstrong, like he plays like Ryan Gosling, like plays Neil Armstrong in the movie. A lot of people don't know the movie because I thought it sucked personally. It made me sad because he went from like two great like films that were about like passion and like what it takes to like achieve like your dream, like of like like whether it be like a drummer or to be a jazz musician or it went from like being an actor. Like he just like focused on that, and then he did First Man, and then he just released Babylon, which was on its own like apparently it did not do well either. Like it was like a bomb. And I'm just curious because like they throw a lot of. I always find that the more money a director has, the worse the film ends up. Usually, not always, but usually. And do you think it's because we get like a case where it's like George Lucas, for example, when he was making Star Wars, it was just that he was almost overconfident in his ability to make a good film that he accidentally hindered the product as well.
Yeah, with him, there was definitely an example of like power corrupted him. Um,
Hmm.
I think a big point with him is that like his age actually I think played a big role. When he made the first Star Wars movie, he was a passionate young man who wanted to make a space adventure in the same way he enjoyed them when he was a kid. Um, when he made the prequels and like the new Indiana Jones movie, he was clearly in a different state of mind. This time, kind of thinking as the famous George Lucas, which
Hmm.
I think definitely unfortunately hindered his creative output. As much as it sucks to say that.
Yeah, I mean, like yeah, like George Lucas is like a definitely like a great example of that. Like, and I know we just like talked about like David Chazelle. I find that like for example, Christopher Nolan. I know we were talking. I find that with Christopher Nolan, like he started out in his career with like certain films like Memento, and then he like went on into like the oh shoot, he did a magician movie, and I'm
The
blanking on what it
Prestige. The Prestige.
the Prestige. Like, and I felt like those films like on his early career were like really like interesting, like just purely story driven, and how he didn't have a lot of money, so he had to do like everything practically. He still does everything practically. However, I find that the more money he got throughout his career in order to like make these big budget movies, I find they almost hindered because I know you're talking about like the Dark Knight trilogy. I know you like the Dark Knight trilogy, and I like it too for what it was at the time. Like, do you find like that Christopher Nolan's losing his touch because now he's making Oppenheimer, where he actually set off like I don't know if it was an actual nuke in the backyard studios of like the
He built a
movie.
real bomb, yeah.
Yeah, he built a real bomb for it. But do you find that like Christopher Nolan's almost losing his touch as a filmmaker as his career goes on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say more so that he's losing his touch would imply that he's lost roots with his connection as an original filmmaker. I think more he's sort of sort of exposed what was always kind of wrong with his movies, which is that he leans really, really far into what I'd say is super serious filmmaking and super serious with a focus on action and plot without as much attention to characters. And I think sort of yeah, the latest Tenet movie sort of showed it's like, okay, you can't have every line of dialogue be exposition. That just doesn't work.
Yeah,
So
especially
people don't
when you
want
make the main character's name protagonist.
that's exactly like okay, like that's a little. I don't think it's as cool as you think. The fact that people don't know the name of your character, like I think that's, um, like right. If they gave him like they did sort of the opposite. Breaking Bad spends so much time just with the characters talking to each other. Um, I think Christopher Nolan definitely does a disservice to himself when he yeah, like just doesn't yeah, I don't know what the best way to put it is, but just yeah, like doesn't spend time actually developing good story, like Paul was talking about.
No worries, keep going. Anyways,
Sorry,
um,
Paul, did you want to jump in?
Like I'm just looking at his list of films that he's made. I mean, they look interesting. But I haven't seen much. I want to see Dunkirk. That looks interesting. Just
Dunkirk
briefly.
was a weird movie, and I'll tell you without spoiling too much.
Hmm.
Okay, so like we know that like it takes place during World War II, and where it's three like different perspectives on was it D-Day, Caleb, like that they're focusing on.
No, it's the Miracle of Dunkirk.
Okay, yeah, okay, sorry, Dunkirk, sorry. Like I mean,
Sorry.
okay, no worries. Anyways, yeah, it's like focusing on the miracle like of Dunkirk, but it's from three different perspectives. You have like the pilot, you have like the actual like soldiers like on the beach, as well as like the boats going to where wasn't it like the boats going towards like Dunkirk, like
Yeah,
actually
yeah, the
save them.
You
rescue.
know,
It was
save
like
the
those like exactly. In terms of, like the film wasn't bad. It just focused like I don't know. It got the award for like its like soundstage. I think that was the only like really good thing of that movie, if I'm being honest. Like the music and like sound was cool, but in terms of like the actual like story, it was just kind of mediocre. Like if you didn't like state that it was a Christopher Nolan film, I wouldn't have really watched the film. Just kind of passed by. Like, would you agree with that, like Caleb? Like,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
yeah, it's not one of his good films. Um, okay, something I did want to focus on. You said the moon landing, conspiracy theory. I got to go back. Wait, so
Talking
wait,
about this,
are, you-
okay.
are you? Yeah, sure. Why not? You, so, do you believe it? Like the moon landing happened, or do you not believe it happened?
I believe the moon landing happened.
What about
I
what
say
about
that.
you, Paul?
Yeah.
What a cuck. Yeah, no, I think it happened. But I have entertained the thought of like, what if? I mean, like, um, in fact, I was just talking about this with a friend of mine, and he was telling me how he was on a date with some girl, and she said, "Oh, it didn't happen." He said like he just left, and I was like, I'm like, I didn't know you felt that strongly about it, but um, it was pretty funny, but like I did think about a few things, like the people did point out, oh, the flag's waving and all this stuff, but the point, what I like, the reason I'm inclined to think it's real is just more like, yeah, okay, like yeah, putting them in low Earth orbit's much easier than going to the moon, but like for them to go through all this fakery, like, and like I think the amount of effort, like yeah, going to the moon's a lot of effort, but I think it just would have, like, if the lid actually got like blown on that, like someone leaked it, which it would be like to fake something like that, like there would be bound for someone to leak at some point. There'd be like a declassified document somewhere, someone like, yeah, I don't know, I think they actually got up there. It was a
Well,
cool
like,
moment for humanity.
I mean, it definitely like was like a cool moment. I will say though, I'm not sure if there would be like necessarily a document, because like the government has been pretty good at hiding things, because they would just redact everything if they did
Oh,
have documents. Because remember like during like after like post 9/11, for example, like there was like a terrorist like the anti-terrorist program that they like instated, where they were just going to like capture a bunch of people that they thought were terrorists and then basically torture them without classifying as torture, because
Oh yeah.
yeah, like torture. Yeah, there was actually a great film about it. It was called like The Report, which had Adam Driver in the role, and the entire film like focused on the fact that America put like so much money, like after 9/11, they're like, yeah, push it all in, and they were essentially like, they got like these psychologists that weren't even psychologists in order to like find like who was responsible and like take down like the terrorist. And
Mm.
where if they just had like any like understanding, where it's like they just mentioned something of like as a joke or any resemblance, they would like take them, they would torture them. And where their classification of torture was, oh well, technically torture is considered to put them at a risk of death, so therefore just don't kill them, because there's no real degree to measure that's close to death. And all of like these like things like happened. They tortured multiple people. They didn't even get like any information from this like interrogation program. And like Adam Driver's role in that is like he's actually going through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of documents, trying to prove that they like were hiding this from the public, because to say that like the president and the government signed off on this program to torture innocent
Mm.
civilians would
you're
obviously like be bad. Oh, you go.
you're right. I'll say I feel like the moon landing conspiracy is more to do with like a collection of suspicious elements to it, more than like I guess what I'll say like a deeply, yeah, like a deeply, like there's proof of it.
Hmm.
And I like to address some of those. One
Yeah,
of them
sure.
being, with the flag. The reason the flag's waving in the footage is because they built a flag that waves automatically in zero gravity, and we're sorry, in a zero atmosphere. They were smart enough to know that ahead of time. And I also think it's kind of a dumb theory, because it sort of implies the U.S. government hadn't thought of that flaw in their story. Like, some 14-year-old in their science class, like, hey, how come that flag's waving? And all of NASA's like, damn it, they figured us out. Like, oh, we didn't even think of that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
sort of like, okay, guys, like, if they lied, they would have done better than that. I also think that so yeah, it was an automatic flag. It was mechanized to wave. Like it had a mechanism that stood up. Um,
Okay, fair enough. However, the reason why people did believe that it was faked in the first place was because they were trying to beat like the race like with Russia to go into space originally. So the whole
Mm.
like theory was just that like, oh, we can't create it based on like what we have at the moment. So then we're just going to like invest in like a bunch of like film production, and then like live broadcast it in
Yeah.
order, like in real time, to do that. And again, like I do believe they went to the moon. Like, yeah, there is some like kind of suspicious things that do happen in the footage. I think one thing I mentioned was how quickly they got to the moon. Like, didn't they like fly into the atmosphere and then make it to the moon in the same day?
Oh,
Um,
I thought it was like a 2-day trip kind of
Was,
thing.
was
yeah,
I don't know. I can't remember.
I didn't
Like
look
I
it
have to
up.
like go back to the footage. There we go. We got Paul fact checking.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I am curious because yeah, no, the moon it's far, and like yeah, I looked into this a bit like a long time ago, and another like one other piece of evidence was like there's like a belt that protects from radiation. I can't remember what it was called, but like the moon's beyond that, and the idea was okay. Well, scientists prior to that point thought it was impossible to go to the moon because it's just too far. Like beyond that, it's too dangerous, but apparently not. Let me look up. What is that radiation belt?
I did hear that theory that it would be too heavy to put lead in that would actually like protect them properly.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
like I remember like there was like a radiation issue where they're like, yeah, when
yeah, the
therefore,
radiation belts. Yeah,
the Van
Mhm.
Allen belt. It's called.
Yeah, I know that like one there was like a filmmaker. I can't remember like when this happened, but he essentially like made the exact moon landing, but he went out of his way to basically prove that you could just film the moon landing exactly like they did with a regular film studio and cheap equipment. like
Yeah,
that was the only thing. Like he actually made like a clip like or like little like film to demonstrate that like hey, it's not impossible. Like
like
everybody like acts like it was like like it looks like grander, but it like that's what like probably drove like a lot of people as well. Like oh shit, it probably was fake, like because of like how they did it. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I would have to look because like the only reason why I would understand it like if it was to be fake like for like the reasoning was because of their race with Russia because the America was always like rivaling with Russia throughout
Mm.
history, right? And they couldn't like lose to them at any point. They
well,
could
that's also because they did lose a bunch of times. Like
yeah. Like the
Russians got
Russians were the first to space.
they
Like
were first to space, first with an animal in space, first to get to the moon just with a robot. Like they
yeah, they're like we're gonna send the first man to space.
like
Yeah,
America really set a benchmark. There was like, but okay, the first man on the moon. Um, yeah,
yeah.
that's why that wording was really emphasized by the Americans.
all
Um,
that matters.
yeah,
Well, and
uh,
also don't forget like the Apollo program started off on a really bad note. Like Apollo 1, like they were doing testing of it and like the crew was burned alive on there. Like there was like an oxygen tank leak.
Yeah, it didn't even like fly. It literally just like
Yeah.
caught flame and
Yeah,
killed everybody.
and just while practicing, like a huge black mark on it. And I mean, a lot of these early Apollo missions, I think they all like had in mind like these probably won't actually make the moon. These are all attempts. But somehow in 11 they got it. Like there's definitely a motive for America to lie, but I mean, like, uh, no, I like, I think I think they did make it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I do believe like they faked it as well. Um,
Wait, do you say you do believe they faked it?
oh,
No, they made
they
it.
made it. They made it. They made it. Like although like I'm like skeptical, like there's nothing like really groundbreaking. The only like conspiracy that like I'm like pretty like sure of would be like 9/11 in that case, and more in the fact that like of the government's involvement in that. Like
How so?
I'm not saying it was fake. So
Well,
like the
I'm
way
glad you don't think 9/11 was fake because that's a little
no
different.
no I know it was real. I just mean like that there was like maybe like some government involvement in it. So I'll lay down my reasoning. Okay, so like first off, is the fact that like when the planes like actually like hit the buildings, it was like pretty like it was obviously like on fire and everything. It was like like shit that was like awful like what happened. However, like when like the actual buildings fell, they almost like exploded all at the same time as if you put thermite through every column of the building and did a controlled demolition. And then you had like building like 110 or 107
Oh,
that was like that
yeah,
wasn't even
Trade Center
close, that just
7.
randomly blew up, and they're like, oh yeah, it was because of a um engine from the plane that came off and hit it. And it's like, how?
Okay, well,
Like,
what I heard from the official story and like is that like World Trade like after the two buildings collapsed, like the fires and all the debris lit World Trade Center 7 on fire. It burned for several hours. Then in the evening it collapsed. Now no one died from that, so it wasn't that bad. But it was still a bit like, okay, this wasn't hit by a plane. How did this just fall down? And I mean, like, the one thing conspiracy or like the one point brought up that like is a bit worrying to me though is like I've heard about thermite found at like
mhm.
the sites. Now I don't know how credible these reports are, but I remember seeing in the past some like engineers saying, okay, like this level of thermite's not normal. Like what's going on here? But then like
Mhm.
I don't know like what's the explanation for that if there is or like because yeah, it was suspicious how fast the buildings came down. Like did look like a controlled demolition. My issue is, well, how are they drilling thermite in like office buildings with people?
Yeah, that would have been a little amok.
Like,
Yeah. Well, like,
this guy's going, just what are you drilling in the wall? Like, what the
well, that's the thing that was funny though, because I'm pretty sure in the documentary they mentioned how like there was like construction working very close to 9/11. That didn't make any sense. There was also like the fact that what was it? I believe like the American government also received threats that these like planes were going to be like driven into the World Trade Center as well and did nothing about them. On
Oh,
top of that, there was like all of like we talked about this the other day where um the like actual like army like the military like where they came to like all of the military action that was focused on like terrorists like acting like if there was the event of like somebody like taking over an aircraft and like holding it hostage, like all of the like those departments were going through an exercise that very day of what to do in the event of that,
mm.
and we're directly like responding like to like the situation of the plane at all, and like the hostages like take over of the plane. There was also the fact that the president was notified like because he was like doing like the speech in like a children's classroom or whatever,
Right.
and they literally said, hey, one of the planes hit the center, and he's like, okay, and then continued on with his day.
One thing is, like, wouldn't there have been a few whistleblowers by now? Because, like, this sounds like such a massive
Oh, there
endeavor.
was whistleblowers. For example, the building 7, one of the guys said it didn't make any sense. The building was fine, but there was an explosion in the wall that they couldn't explain because they saw the building on fire, but there was just a random explosion that happened.
Mm.
And the like nobody like there was like multiple people that explained like building 7 made no sense. There was the fact that they like sensed like firefighters said that they thought like they saw an explosion on the bottom columns for no reason too.
Oh.
There's also the fact that that was very weird was that when it came to like the official document where they were going to record like the transcript of like the interview of the president, he had to have was it oh shoot, who was the vice president?
Cheney.
Cheney. Cheney had to be present in the interview. They would not allow Cheney to like not be present in that interview. And then
Right.
on top of that, they never released the official transcript of what happened and what took place and what he said because he was under oath the entire time.
Huh.
So it's just like all of these like things in tandem just is kind of skeptical. And then the last thing was that the immediate usage of like just sending the army to go into like an area that like what was the area that they like wanted to send the military to, Caleb? That made no sense.
Iraq?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was so blatant with that, and like I can't remember there was one guy who worked in the admin. He was interviewed after, and he said like immediately after the attack, Cheney and Bush. Well, I think really Cheney tells him because I don't think Bush was really making the own rules. It seemed like Cheney was controlling him. Like
Yeah, Chady was kind of slimy a lot of the time. Like, oh, sorry, you go.
well, yeah, and Bush, he didn't seem that bright, but like they immediately says, okay, we need to find evidence on Iraq, like connection to this, and it was ridiculous for them to say Iraq, like, and like I think the whole calculation was Americans will think Muslim country, terrorist, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Literally, and that's the thing that made no sense. Was there just like, yeah, we need to go to Iraq to catch these terrorists, but how do you know that they're there?
Well,
Like,
well, just the idea that like Saddam Hussein, this like secular military strongman is like an Al Qaeda ally. Like it's like laughable on its face. Like
Yeah.
it's American, like, well, it was preying on American stupidity. That's what it was. As long as they could sell it to the supporters too. It wouldn't just be rednecks, it'd be anyone. They could, make a case of, oh, this is revenge for 9/11. Like, they could make a
Yeah.
better case for Afghanistan, but Iraq, like, and like we know now the whole weapons of mass destruction was BS.
Hmm.
Colin Powell, who went to the UN, showed the yellow cake uranium. He later admitted, and he said like he regretted doing that because even he knew it was false. Like, just, it was very slimy. And what for? I mean, was it a geopolitical chess game, or I think it was also partly Bush. They doesn't like Saddam Hussein. He's trying to finish the job his dad started.
I actually read up on this recently
Hmm.
for my Islamic studies course. So it was a book. It was a book of apologia for Islam, but in the introductory chapters, it was just discussing why it's relevant to understand the religion.
Mhm.
And there was like Bill Kristol and the neocons were like had this like really really aggressive like lobby, like were really really aggressively lobbying for war. Um, like neocons clearly wanted this war, and as an ideological collection of think tanks, they were like basically like endlessly spamming the White House with their connections with like they're like I don't know what you want to like think tank newsletters. Also, a lot of the architects of it were huge. It's worth considering a lot of the architects of the Iraq War were massive Zionists.
Mhm.
Like a lot of them had these strong religious convictions of, we need to do this because it works for Israel rather than for necessarily the best geopolitical interests of the United States. Now, I think it's a little bit of a stretch for some people say that's the only cause of the war, which I find
Mhm.
to be like, no, 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 like there's more to it than that, but
Yeah.
still worth looking at.
Well,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
to add to that, with like Israel played a bit of a real weird role because Netanyahu. Well, first of all, Netanyahu, he's been on and off prime minister since like the early 2000s. It's nuts how long his career in politics is. But there is a clip of him like testifying to U.S. Congress saying, if you take out the Iraqi regime, that will have positive reverberations on the region for decades or something. It's like such a stupid thing to say. But Israel never sent troops to Iraq, but like they definitely had an interest because it's in their region. But
yeah,
yeah, it always seemed out of the question for them to send troops. But one thing I know, Cheney was always inspired by the Project for the New American Century, which was PNAC, was the abbreviation. But it was like this plan to replace 5 regimes in 7 years or something, And the list is kind of the regimes that have been lost. Well, Syria's still going, but there's a civil war. Syria, Libya, Iraq, I think Lebanon, Iran, or something like that.
Hmm.
These certain thorns and kind of Israel and the U.S.'s like goals in the region, like,
yeah,
but like the one result of the whole Iraq War was like during the days of Saddam Hussein. I remember, I think Iraq at one point actually did have some like reactors to mess with Israel, and I know at one point Israel did bomb some reactors, I think in Iraq, but this wasn't some nuke the whole world kind of situation. It was they're trying to do stuff, but Israel was a bit scared of Iraq, and I mean the Gulf War set them back a lot, but following the Iraq War, there's no longer a threat from there. As long as ISIS doesn't attack Israel, which they don't really do that much, like it's a chaotic land. There's no threat.
yeah. Also, tying things back to 9/11 a bit.
Oh,
Um,
we went off.
That's okay.
uh,
That's okay.
the I also think one other thing to keep in mind is just that my main reason I'd say for not believing it was like an inside job or anything like that is just because um, executively the only countries that could get away with doing that without their own populations being like super pissed are like dictatorships like China. Um,
Hmm.
like I don't really see the possibility of um like that like you gotta think like the United States government, like whatever conspiracy you believe in, it'd have to be one that involves a lot of American institutions. um like we're getting to the point of like, okay, so he deployed the military in to like drill thermite into this place, and like all of those contractors are in on this, like I'm a yeah, like Was he coordinating?
Yeah. How do you convince like contract? Hey, you're drilling thermite in this building, no reason, just
Yeah, like it seems like
Yeah.
something where it's some uh like to do this, to have the intelligence agencies to coordinate this with all of the Middle East, like okay, so every member of the NSA and the CIA this is like in on this.
I
I
mean,
find that a bit of a far stretch, but yeah.
yeah, I do get it. Like from like in terms of like how do they like get like the thermite into the building? Like I know like there was a really good like documentary that like focused on like those different like arguments like on how like they were getting into the building. I remember like they said like that like people like previously like said that there was like a building designs to put thermite in, but like I again I can't remember like too far back on the documentary. I would say that, however, like the reason like why, because like I know that in my pseudoscience class like the teacher's like why would the government do that, and I'm like, well, there's like plenty of reasons why, especially the fact that like at, like post 9/11 there was all of the like changes of security in the country, to limit like immigration like immensely, and then like also like put like all these designs to invade the privacy to like technically like get like any criminal like it by like any means, and it put so much power like into the government, as well as like to like invade like other countries, like because the terrorist threat. I'm not saying the terrorist threat wasn't real. I'm not saying the planes didn't happen. I'm just saying that I think that they knew there was going to happen. They profited off of it.
There was a good CBC documentary years ago where they trace actually like from the 1993 bombings to 9/11 and basically showing how really the FBI and CIA, well, it was more negligent. They really didn't coordinate their intelligence. But like these guys who did a 9/11, like some of them were somewhat on watch lists. Like I remember hearing stories how they would like get together in a German cafe and they would have code words for things and there'd be agents kind of listening in, but for some reason they slipped through the cracks. But like there were people suspicious of them. Like when they went to flight school in the US, like some of the classmates found them odd, and it's like these people didn't want to learn how to land or take off, just how to fly. Like what, that didn't draw red lines.
Sorry, it's just the fact that you said they never learned to land or take off. I don't think their mission was to do either.
But anyone at flight school you'd ask questions,
Yeah, fair enough.
So no, but like let's say though this is like I think the biggest thing is at least negligence on the part of the U.S. to act, even if it was like if we take it at that Al Qaeda did this completely themselves, they could have prevented some things. They could have made a better effort. But one thing for sure is they definitely used 9/11 as an excuse to do tons of things that weren't needed. Yeah, like the Iraq War, 100%.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
and that one's the most blatant because it's like it just literally had nothing to do with 9/11. At least Afghanistan, the thinking, well, Bin Laden was there, and Pakistan, he would hide in the border region, but at least there was some fair justification for Afghanistan. I'm not saying it was totally good, but it wasn't completely nuts to invade there like Iraq.
Sorry, you go.
Well, yeah, it's if like it's on the same par of like America invading like Libya at the time, like nothing to do with 9/11. It's just a dictator they don't like.
I mean, yeah, like fair enough. I was gonna say, so did the plane that went into the Pentagon, was that like the same day as 9/11? Just
Yep.
curious.
It was
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's my extra little bit of it, like just to tie it all in. Okay, so the plane that actually like hit the Pentagon, I remember watching, because there was this pilot describing like the way that it had to have hit the Pentagon. They would have had to do the complete nosedive, pull up last minute, curve it in perfectly to like hit the Pentagon. Would have taken so much experience as a pilot to be able to perform.
Yeah.
That it was almost ridiculous to like almost like suggest that these two guys that just like took over the plane knew how to do that perfectly. And then on top of that, why is it that like, so they had one camera, I think, that was able to catch that, and that was like the security post, right? Why is it like when it went into it? How is it that the only thing that could be found, like, so you saw like the wreckage and everything, was like two passports in perfect condition revealing the identities of the two terrorists? How in the hell was they able to do?
Like they found the passports just
They
like that.
found 2 passports. They're like, the only thing in the wreckage we were able to find was these 2 passports of the pilots that took over,
Well,
and it was in some good condition to read.
well, yeah, okay. That if they found passports and like they didn't find the black boxes, I don't think, which says something. Like black boxes are designed to survive most crashes. So I mean, like, yeah, it ain't that convenient, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look what we found here. Yeah, I didn't know that one actually.
Hold on. Oh wait, did it say? Okay, so no, it's at the 9/11 one. So like in terms of like the like when they did the Twin Towers, at least I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'll have to check on that because I remember like finding that like they were able to like find like the passports in good condition. I'll have to fact check that,
Mm.
but I don't know. It was like definitely questionable. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
how?
No, like I have heard some pilots say like for the speed they were going, and like yeah, and anecdotally like on flight sim like you can't like when you fly that low close to the ground like going 300 knots like you risk like overspeeding. You know you can go 300 knots up at like 36,000 feet. Fine, the Earth's thin. For them to do that, maneuver perfectly to hit these buildings like that is a bit kind of I don't know. Seems a bit far fetched a bit. But on the other hand though, like the thing was like these planes had families and stuff like that. Like people like unless these are all crisis actors, like people's family members went missed like died. You know, and like
Yeah.
Hmm.
the planes did
Yeah,
go somewhere.
yeah. Like I'm not like stating like it didn't happen. Like it is like a
Yeah.
tragedy. Like I do like admit that. Like another thing I'm curious is like because like the Pentagon wasn't too badly damaged from that plane, and
Yeah.
I'm like, how is it that this Pentagon was barely like damaged, but yet the Twin Towers it was so bad that it caused it to collapse?
Also, wait, I'm curious. Who do you think orchestrated this conspiracy? Like, what's your you have like an actor behind this?
Not like a specific like actor like of who would have like orchestrated it. I know that like in like I know that in the report, I believe that they didn't involve the president like too directly. Like I know like that they like said like, oh yeah, sign these documents to like initiate like this interrogation program like that was before, but like they didn't really involve the president too much. And I couldn't give you like the exact like actor or what division like was directly responsible for the decisions made. um I'm just saying like just based on the evidence it just seems weird like how like well it favored and benefited the government.
Yeah, yeah. It was
That's
they
what I
loved
mean.
that. They loved that they could have now an excuse to privately surveil people.
Hmm.
You know, security theater. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
PSA. Like they love that.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's what I mean. It's just like, you know, um like I don't know, like I when I watched like the documentary like on it, I just find like all of these things that like lined up just seem too coincidental. Like and that happens a lot. Like the American government just seems to be very lucky a lot of the time in a lot of different instances. I mean, we were talking like the other like the other day about like for example like Pearl Harbor, like how they had like all the ships out at the
Oh,
same
I
time
heard
going
that.
through the
Yeah.
trade. Yeah, yeah. You want to like go into that, Caleb, a little more?
Sure. It's a little thin, but it's the facts that on the day of Pearl Harbor they were doing a training exercise, which so happens to have all of the aircraft carriers out on patrol, like just out on like the open waters, which I will say it's very lucky, specifically because aircraft carriers are what wins you a war, and without them, Japan would have like Pearl Harbor was a good idea. It basically is what I'm getting at. Like from the Japanese perspective, like if you just bombed and sank the American fleet, full stop, before even the beginning of a conflict, that would have been the end of the American Empire in the Pacific. Like the
Hmm.
Japanese just would have had it. But the Japanese got really unlucky in that the Americans actually happened to have like their best stuff out on the water, which is I don't know. That's a bit of an eyebrow raiser. I don't know if
Yeah.
any fake. It's suspicious.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, the Americans should have known that the oil or the whatever embargo they did towards Japan was going to provoke them. Like they should have been able to see kind of like this would do that. So they probably made the calculation, move the boats right at, right after we do this, just in case.
Yeah. See, like that's what I mean too. Is just like to me, it's like I'm not like say like necessarily like like everybody's like let's do all these like different things. I feel like it's just that they know the threats are happening and they just move out of the way to like specifically to let those things happen so they can profit off of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, and I mean like with not like that's why I'm like with 9/11 like maybe like the third bite like didn't happen, but it's like they knew that there was going to be the planes coming. They knew
Yeah.
all of this, and I feel like that whether the threat might like happen like or how much of it was an inside job, it's the fact that the government understands that these problems are going to occur, and it's like not acting at all or like doing anything to prevent it because they know that like through those actions they like can't get their ultimate goal.
Yeah. No, I buy that.
Yeah.
Um, I find
Yeah.
that cool.
I mean, yeah, the government's like been pretty like sketchy. Like, or for example, like like how like in the 70s, like with the release of like LSD and how they wanted to control people. There's
Yeah.
like this whole theory that apparently that they were like bringing in different individuals like from like a young age and experimenting on them with LSD from like criminal. What I don't know about Al Capone if he was like brought into it. I can't remember who it was.
Wait.
Oh no, it wasn't Al Capone. It wasn't Al Capone. It was a guy who he was in the Johnny Depp plays him. Hold on. Um, I'll have to get the movies. I'll come back to that in a second. But more that like when the government was experimenting like on individuals like with LSD, um they actually would grow up to like do horrendous crimes. For example, I think that Manson was like was given LSD like as a child. Like they actually brought him into like the
Oh,
program
neat.
and they like tested on him and shit and like he like grew up like to become like this like cult, not technically like a serial killer because he killed anybody actively, he just manipulated and became like this heinous leader.
Wait.
There was like oh sorry, you go.
Wait. Was he a serial killer? Like, didn't he kill people?
I mean I think like
No,
I
no,
didn't think
never
I
with his
thought
hands. No, that's he would incite people to do it, but he never actually killed anyone himself, from what I heard.
Oh.
hmm,
But like these were bad murders, but his like followers would like show up at some celebrity's house with a knife and butcher them, and but yeah, no, like from what I understand, he never. But they were still able to convict him. So
Yeah.
hmm. It was in that film Black Mask where like James Whitey Bulger, I think like they like invite like they got him into like do like those bless you bust you again to do like those like LSD experiments. I don't know, but I do know like that like they would like test like on like the public like a lot, and how like they originally did
Yeah.
it for like to actually like control like their mind.
That one I believe. I believe
Hmm.
that conspiracy, and I'm usually pretty hard on them, but they, um, that I find believable that they experimented on people.
Yeah, there's actually an entire game like the Outlast games. Did you guys ever like play that or know about them?
Oh no, never played that one.
Oh man, those games were cool because it takes place like in the asylum where like they like did a bunch of like experiments. You play as this guy like who has a camcorder. You go into like these different asylums and you're basically trying to like uncover like the mysteries that are there. But you like encounter like all of these like strange individuals who are trying to kill you. They're like been tortured and like tested on all these mental patients. And you could also read documents that are actual real documents in like real life of like government testing on like individuals. Like one of them like they tried to like hypnotize like a girl in order to like kill like the other person. There was like like the testing of LSD. I mean it's pretty crazy like what they did. I mean like in like like in terms of like like psychology, like it does have like a dark past where like they would like test and like do these like different procedures that weren't grounded on like, empirical evidence or anything like that. So I don't know, it's just kind of creepy when you look back on like how twisted the government can be. I don't know, like can you guys think of like any other instances
Yeah.
or like
Oh
what
yeah.
else do you guys want to
Like a
talk about?
remote control dog.
Well,
Oh, remote control dog.
I don't mean a robot dog. I mean that they did surgery on a dog and put a computer chip in its brain so you could control it with an actual remote.
wait, what? When was this?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was the documents got leaked in 2000. Well, let's look it up.
I've never heard of this one. That's scary, actually.
This one's been confirmed. Like this isn't really a conspiracy. Um, copy. Um, what's the Black Vault? Do you guys know?
The Black Vault?
Yeah,
No.
this doesn't look reliable, but here, the New York Post. Copy this article.
Oh yeah. Oh, by the way, it is confirmed that there was like LSD testing on Whitey Bulger, by the way, to
Yes,
try and get him to reveal more about the mafia.
but yeah, it looks like I'm 1963 prod. Jesus Christ, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping it was more recent. Like, oh shit, they just figured this out. Now that they've had it all along.
Yeah, that's scary.
But yeah, I'll put it in the chat. Um, no, yeah, the CIA has had this in. Yep. Okay. Yeah. I know. I have the article up now. No, it's crazy to think. It really is. These intelligence organizations are really haven't been reined in. I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, are you guys on the abolish the CIA train, or do you think that's too far?
I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like abolish the CIA. Like, I think that there just needs to be like some restructuring and maybe limiting like, the amount of like power and authority they have over people in terms of
Yeah.
their jurisdiction. Like, I think they get a little too much power for what they actually are able to.
What they
Like, not
do.
saying like not saying like they don't need to like take place, because I know the FBI and CIA, they're both responsible for catching like a lot of serial killers, for example, and like connections to different murderers and preventing these crimes from happening. But I don't know. I think that when you like put, you know, like two, like when you put people together, like I don't know, like the group, like they have like so much authority. Sometimes we forget that like they're kind of human, and that like
Mm.
sometimes like you know they might not be exactly acting in the interest that betters everybody, and that they might be benefiting just themselves and what like gives them power to.
I am glad that the CIA is no longer like the hero of every movie. Like in the 2000s,
Oh, really?
like
Yeah.
yeah, like the CIA is like even there was a show called Chuck I used to watch, um, where it was like, oh yeah, like the CIA and the NSA are the good guys, like automatically. And now we're starting to deconstruct, like, okay, but are they not just the American KGB? Do they not commit the same kind of acts that the Gestapo and the SS did? Like just that level of introspection of what kind of role models are these?
Well, yeah, no, I think I don't. Yeah, I like you said. I don't know about completely abolishing the CIA. Like they can do some good, but then I almost feel like the FBI can handle most should be able to handle like criminal investigations and stuff like that. Like if the CIA often just gets engaged in like doing like blatantly illegal things, like illegal funding, um, like the kind of stuff that would like you don't want revealed, like the kind of stuff that like even the president doesn't know about. That's where it gets scary. If they're dealing drugs halfway across the world to raise funds for death squads in here, like
Yeah.
Hmm. I mean,
maybe.
that actually kind of reminds me. Who was it? Um, I saw something lately where it was that I don't know if it was the FBI or CIA, where they were basically like just trying to like ask different people. They're like, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool to join this like terrorist organization or root for this cause?" And then they'll be like, "Sure, yeah, okay, whatever." And then it'd be like arrest the guy and say like that he was an associate of like this terrorist
Yeah.
organization. Was it like I don't know what happened with that. Like I just
I saw a meme. It was from John Wick 3. And it's the CIA when they find a guy with severe mental health issues and violent tendencies. And it's Lawrence Fishburne saying, "Somebody please get this man a gun." Like, yeah, like that's pretty much how it is.
oh man.
Um, yeah. Um, no, there's definitely reason not to trust the CIA.
So would you
Uh,
say that like the CIA almost like too often, and that like in order to like improve like their own funding, because in order to get them more funding they need to prove their like their worth, and that they have to like close a bunch of cases or you know arrest a bunch of people to like justify like their being. So do you think that they just almost like just kind of lie and make up instances for like arresting people like in order to like
no, no, no.
seem like a greater force, or what would you say?
The CIA stands for Central Intelligence Agency, and Andrew Bustamante, I believe, he was
Mm.
on Lex Friedman. I don't know if you saw it, and I think he was on Joe Rogan too. His CIA agent.
Yeah, I've listened to his interviews. He's good.
Yeah, he describes the CIA as a company with one customer, the President of the United States. And their job is to give a brief of about 3 minutes every day. The CIA, put simply, is the news organization whose job it is to give news to the president.
Okay.
Most of it is classified, and the military as well, like just the executive branch of government. It's their eyes and ears. It's their, instead of Google searching something, right? Because we don't want the president just going like, okay, Wikipedia, like I'm like the place they got their information is the CIA, and a lot of the times what they do is reconnaissance of just listening to other countries, and a lot of times what they do when the government needs the CIA to do something off the books is they get them to find untraceable funds, because you can't exactly go to Congress and say, I need $5 million to assassinate the president of Nigeria. We'd like to pass a bill for this. And then like AOC's like, this is unethical. Then it's like, okay, can we get the speaker? Like, they can't do that. So
Yeah.
to get funding, they're like, okay, the CIA, go to South America, find some money somehow, however you can, and then guy. Like, that's kind of, I think, how it happens.
Okay, like, so, like, yeah, the CIA is just like directly responsible for like informing the president, like coming up with information of like what's happening and like how to like best deal with the situation.
Yeah.
As it, so like, would you say like, what would you say for like then the FBI's like responsibilities?
The FBI is a domestic police organization, so they're unlike the CIA, which is usually sort of seen as fundamentally being a global thing, just global, including the U.S. The FBI, the FBI does not go to other countries. The FBI isn't even specializing in intelligence. Their specialization is in law. It's just what they are is the Federal Bureau of Investigations. So their role in United States law enforcement, I believe, is just the equivalent of our RCMP.
Yeah.
If there's a cartel that spans 5 states, we need more than just the locally funded county sheriff to take care of that. Or if there's a string of terrorist attacks involving the Ku Klux Klan, then that's another thing where it's like, okay, we need like a larger, the federal police are going to deal with this, rather than just Chuck Davidson elected as constable back in 2016. Like, no, we need like something serious to take care of this.
Oh, okay. So like, yeah, I can't believe. So like, so you're telling me like, so the CIA actually would like go to like South America and basically like sell drugs in order to get like funding. I mean, I didn't know that. Like, that's news to me.
I mean, among our generation, I think it's more common to take this as like a known fact. I have gone with like my older like relatives, and I've said things like, "Oh yeah, like the Gulf of Tonkin incident was faked," and they're like, "What do you mean it was fake?" Yeah, no, Vietnam War was based on a fake attack, and then they're like, "What?"
Okay, like I do know that like the Vietnam war was based off a fake attack where they're just like the Vietnamese hit us, and it's like actually no.
What's the story though? Like wasn't there well, it was obvious the U.S. wanted to get involved in Vietnam, but like,
I'll tell you my version of the story.
Oh no.
So basically, Vietnam says we want independence from France, and then the U.S. is like, yeah, good. I mean, fuck colonialism. Like, we revolted against a monarchy. And then the China and the Soviet Union are like, hey, we'll give you tanks and guns if you wear a red flag. Then Ho Chi Minh says, oh yeah, sure, I guess I'm a communist now. Anyways, I need weapons to fight the French. And then the U.S. is like, what? You can't separate from the French. It was like,
oh yeah.
What do you mean you don't want to be part of France anymore? And then the U.S. found it's like, we're just going to put some boats going by the Vietnamese coast. Oh no, one of them sank. I guess they want to go to war with us. Vietnam wants to take over America. Okay.
Oh.
So
okay, I did know about like one of the boats sank, and then there was no like reason to believe like the Vietnamese were like responsible for it. There was no like evidence or anything, and I thought it was like some weird like understanding. I didn't know like I mean. It is pretty believable that they would have like faked something like that in order to like, give justification.
The thing is, back then, the United States had a better constitutional system. So if you wanted to declare war on another country, you needed Congress to approve it,
Mm-hmm.
which is very important because Congress is the elected body of the American population. It's
Hmm.
in a sense it represents the American people, and the president is just the executive branch, right? His job is like the CEO of the company. Like he runs things, but he can't make decisions about what actually like the plan of the country is in that sense. The idea is that the president's job isn't to decide whether or not we go to war. His job is just if we do go to war to administrate that and appoint the appropriate generals to it. But no, it looks like that was an example of the executive branch sort of going into, like they faked it basically to get Congress's approval for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is some evidence similar to Pearl Harbor. Like it is mysterious that whenever the president wants to go to war, there's a mysterious attack that comes out of nowhere. Of oh man, we got attacked! Like whoa, man, guess we have to fight this country now.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's my take on it.
I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because always thought like the Vietnamese War was like, I don't know, it never made sense to me. I'm just like, okay, like there's a fake attack or like there's some attack that you believe that wasn't even real, then you just went to war and then you lost, like
No,
because it went. Oh, sorry, you go.
well, the Vietnam War though is more of like this Cold War chess game though. It's kind of like Korea though. Like I have thought about it very much. Like we don't really regard the Korean War as this kind of failure or like a bad thing because I mean now partly it wasn't broadcast on like color TV like the Vietnam War was, but like with the Vietnam, like even if the war started over the Gulf of Tonkin, I mean, Americans saw it as this Cold War fight.
Hmm.
I know one of the elections was like a complete blowout. I think it was Nixon. Um, one of the elections, his opponent was kind of unsure about the Vietnam War kind of thing, but Nixon was firm, like, no, 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 we're here to fight communism, and he won almost every state, like unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you associate anything with like communism and like Russia, whatever, and then the Americans like, yeah, we gotta fight. Like,
Well,
like
that's the thing. That's what appealed to them. So I think like, but like I think the Vietnam was really just this Cold War chess game of like, okay, this if America doesn't control it, then the Soviet Union will. But they, yeah, you have to sell it to your people. So yeah, you could sell it by a fake attack. I mean, it's kind of like what Russia, did in Ukraine, like where they say, oh, the Ukrainians they're genociding the Russians in the Donbass, therefore we need to invade. It seemed ridiculous to us, but I'm sure Russians ate that up. So.
well, I know that with like Russia, like the reason why like they even went into Ukraine was because they originally like Russia like made it agree like back way back to the Cold War. The reason why they ended it was that they made the agreement like say like hey, as long as you don't make it so like everybody like signs the shoot, what is it? Like it's not NAFTA.
Joins NATO?
Was yeah, NATO. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Like like sign NATO, and then like with like every like president and every coming year, like they've like moved like NATO to like get closer and closer to the Russian like lines,
Yeah.
and Putin even like claimed like, listen, if you guys like go and do like sign like Ukraine and like get like our surrounding countries to like sign this, we will go to war because you're violating that agreement. And then they're like, yeah, well, we're gonna get Ukraine, and then that's essentially what started the war.
Well,
So it was almost like kind of negligence.
there's a few things to that. Part of it is that it wasn't a written agreement. It was a meeting between, oh my gosh, Gorbachev.
Mm-hmm.
Meeting between Mikhail Gorbachev in the year 1990 regarding expansion. And part of it had to do with the breakup of the Soviet Union. One thing we don't fully realize is that the Russians didn't quite see it as immediately as a loss in the same way that the rest of the world did. There was even talk of like, hey, like I guess the Cold War's over. We're gonna break up all these big alliances, and then America's like, yeah, you break up the Soviet Union, and we'll yeah, like yeah, NATO's gonna stick around, but half of that, yes. So they're sort of. I think part of that promise is that they just told Gorbachev, from what I heard, is they just told him, hey, we won't expand NATO past this line. Which, I mean, there's two things. One thing to add on to that, if we're gonna play devil's advocate for the Russians,
Hmm.
the Maidan Revolution in 2014 is a little bit suspicious, and you'll get in hot water if you talk about it because it does sound like you're kind of defending Putin, but
No, I'm not. I'm not. Okay, hold on. I want to make it clear. Like I'm not the.
like,
Yeah,
like the royal you.
yeah.
if you talk about this, but there is some truth to it. In the early 2010s, there was a Russian aligned Ukrainian president who got overthrown, and then a new pro-Western president was installed who was going to join NATO. And from a Russian perspective, they see that as like a CIA operation. They just say
Yeah.
it's like they had a Russian ally there, and then the CIA had him killed or had him basically like kicked out of the country, and then they put their guy in named Zelensky. So that's I can't prove that, but it is a thought.
Yeah, I mean, like, fair. I just want to make it like evidently clear. Like, I'm not like supporting like Putin's actions at all. I'm just saying like he like that is like technically like his reasons like for like wanting to go to war, and like that, you know, a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know that. They just say, oh, the Russians just randomly like went into Ukraine for no reason. It wasn't for no reason. There is a reason, and like partly it's fault like of like the U.S. for like not like taken on this danger like sooner. They've been kind of chill about it, if I'm being honest, throughout the entire
Yeah.
war. Like they haven't like been involved. They're just like, oh yeah, nuclear threat, whatever, it should be fine. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they've just been kind of a little laxed about it, which is kind of concerning. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think of like anything else about that, but yeah, it's just kind of like how it is.
yeah. I was gonna say it's getting on like an
Mm.
hour and a half now. Do we wanna start tuckering down?
Yeah, I think we're gonna conclude the podcast here. You know what? Thank you very much, both Caleb and Paul, like for your time, like on this podcast and like coming here to like have this conversation. It means a lot to me, and a
Thanks for
lot
having
for
us.
like, yeah, there's no worries, man. Like it means a lot for like people like listening in. In terms of like the audience, if you guys want to see more content like this, you can always check out the Triangle Button YouTube channel. See like the gameplays or see shorts or like see the other podcast episodes that we have on here. So yeah, without further ado, I think we're going to conclude it. So yeah, see you later, guys.
Nice.
See you later.
Yeah.